Hi. My experience in betting was in the 1970s, and things may have changed quite a lot since then. If you go into a betting shop these days, there are gaming machines everywhere, and people gamble on all kinds of other sports like football, cricket, motor racing, probably. But in the 70s, when I was doing it, there were horses and there were dogs. There were exceptions. People occasionally bet on things like heavyweight boxing championships or the boat race or the result of a general election, but that was the exception. The rule was horses and dogs. Dogs were in the evenings, out of hours, so it was almost exclusively horse betting, and typically there'd be two or three meetings, horse race meetings every day, and there'd be six races at each meeting. Occasionally, the weather was so bad in the winter that meetings were cancelled, and sometimes they were cancelled nationwide. And then we might resort to having Irish meetings covered, and there were a few Irish tracks that could be covered. It's a bit less frosty over there. It rains more, but it snows less. Anyway, so it's horses and it's horses really. People had they bet on the dogs overnight to some extent. There were always a few bets to sort out in the morning, and if there was going to be any serious liability with these bets, if they could amount to a lot of money, uh, I would notify them to my head office and they would deal with it. But otherwise, it was horse racing. And I, of course, in those days there were no computers or, um, well, we had adding machines. We had tills that were added the bets up, and also a machine that the tills had a timing device on them, and then you had a machine that you put the bet through, and it photographed the bet. So it photographed the bet with another clock, so the time the bet was registered to a particular time. That was important for their accounting and for the general honesty of their staff. But I'll come to that later. Um, no, there were really two kinds of uh, professional gamblers. The people are ask. That's always the first thing they ask. Oh, did you ever come across any professional gamblers? Yeah, no, not really. In betting shops, they didn't uh, work because there's a slight tax differential between the betting shop and the track. So a professional gambler would gamble on the track, on the course, and people who occasionally described themselves as professional gamblers, they were usually fantasists, really. They'd like to think of themselves as professional gamblers, but really they were just losers on a streak, on a winning streak, I suppose. And they people often like to think of themselves as in that way, but they're not. There are two types of people who really are professional gamblers. Now, first of all, I should explain how betting works. Uh, uh, the the course betting operates a bit like an insurance market, like Lloyd's of London. And what the bookmakers on the course, there may be a couple of dozen of them, depending on the size of the meeting, uh, would take bets and communicate with each other using a sign language, which was called tic tac, not tick-tock, but tic-tac, and they would lay bets off with their fellow bookmakers. So all the bookmakers on the course were in touch with each other, and they created a market. And the aim of a bookmaker is to take bets and arrange the prices, the rewards, the book that they offer, to take bets so that whichever horse wins the race, the bookmaker will make a profit. That's their aim. They don't always pull it off. It's a little bit hit and miss, but that's what they're aiming for. So if they get a large amount of money on one horse, the odds on that horse will go down, and the odds on the other horses in the race will go up until people start betting on the better odds. And so in that way, it's like an insurance market. All the bookmakers are covering themselves and with each other and reinsuring with each other, so that if they lose, well, if the horse that they've got the most money bet on wins the race, they don't lose. And the larger bookmakers, the off-course bookmakers, like the one I worked in, if we took a large bet, or we had a large liability from a cumulative bet, a lot of money riding on a particular horse, then we could notify it to our head office, and they would have a representative on the course that they could then notify and again lay off some of their money on the course, thereby affecting the odds or the market effect for that horse. That's an example of how successful this was. In the 5 years I worked for a bookmakers, I think only a handful of times they actually made a loss in cash terms on the day. They might have had good days and bad days, and some days they probably didn't make enough money to justify the cost of running the premises and staffing it, but generally speaking they did, and very, very occasionally they lost money. So there are two types of people that you could describe as professional gamblers who bet on horses. The first kind is the sort of person who spends all their time looking at form, studying the horses, looking at the races, the condition of the course, assessing the jockeys and the trainers, seeing what the history of their work has been, and what they're looking for primarily is value. And if they bet on a horse that's got a 1 in 4 chance of winning, and they get 6 or 7 to 1 on it, that, well, 3 times out of 4 the horse is going to lose. But when it does win, they get 6 or 7 times their original stake. So what they're always looking for is a horse that's priced in the market at a higher odds than is reflected by their chances of winning. And those sort of professional gamblers might wait days or weeks and for an opportunity to come along, and then go in heavy on it, go in with their boots on, as it were. But they're not frightened. Then, if they don't see an opportunity, they won't gamble. They won't. They're quite happy not to gamble. They're not looking for an opportunity to have a bet, because they're not in it for the sport. They're in it to make some money. Now, the other type of professional gambler is somebody who has connections. Somebody, I don't think jockeys are allowed to gamble on their own races, the ones that they're actually running in. But their brother-in-law is, or their cousin might be. And so then there are also people connected with the stables, like the trainers and the stable hands and the people that ride the horses every day. And they know what's the form of the horses is. They know if a horse is performing particularly well, if it's really in the peak of its condition, and so they're in the know. They've got a superior knowledge. But the important thing to remember about either kind of professional gambler is that they're not aiming to win their money from bookmakers. They're aiming, and the bookmakers are aiming for them to win their money from the people who invest or bet their money on the losing horses. So the bookmakers are, they're willing to take their bets. They're a fair bet, but they're watching them closely. They're very aware of who these people are, and they're adjusting their market accordingly. So they're sort of working almost hand in glove with bookmakers, really. And there are other people that I suppose they would consider themselves professional gamblers, but actually they're criminals, really, because it is a crime to manipulate the market. There are two ways you can do that. You can either manipulate the odds so that you bet more money on the track on one horse, meanwhile you're betting a load of money on another horse off the course, so that you're fiddling with the odds, in other words, or you could be fiddling with the result of the race, and it's a lot easier, of course, it's a lot easier to stop a horse from winning than it is to make a horse win. You just give it a few sleeping tablets with its breakfast and that'll do the trick. But you can't make a horse win. I mean, even if it's trying very hard, it just can't do it. Anyway, that's professional gambling. Otherwise, the bread and butter gambling, the bread and butter for bookmakers is the habitual gambler. Well, two kinds of people really. The habitual gambler, who is like an alcoholic in a way. They like to gamble, but they keep it under control. They have a certain amount of money they will lose, or they are prepared to lose every day, and they won't depart from that. They will consistently lose over a period of time, but they take those downs in exchange for the occasional ups. Occasionally they will win, and they like and enjoy the exhilaration of having some money, and feeling rich and so on. But yeah, that won't really change their pattern. Their pattern is to gamble regularly, lose regularly, occasionally win. And then there are the other type of people who are compulsive gamblers, and that would cover quite a lot of people, really. But there are different types of compulsive gamblers. There are some people who, for example, they will gamble everything they've got. Whatever they've got in their pocket, whatever they can lay their hands on, they will gamble it until it's gone. If they win, they have all of a sudden more money. What they do is they start gambling more until they've lost that money. So they're compulsively losing money, really. There are some people who will go on, they'll have a good day at the bookmakers, win a load of money on the horses, and take their winnings, go out to a casino at night and lose it at the roulette table. You know, they just, whatever amount of money they have, they will lose. And there are other people who have a more self-destructive streak in them. They're on a downer, and they're out to lose. But I've known people. One man in particular comes to mind. He was the story was that his wife had left him, and probably left him because he was a gambler. But the story was that his wife had left him. He was really depressed, and so he set about gambling away everything he owned until his house was taken away from him. Well, I suppose lastly I should add that there are some people who they don't exactly profit by gambling, but they're gambling with money which they otherwise wouldn't have, like they've stolen it, or they've earned it and haven't paid tax on it, or if they declared it, their wife might get half of it, and they're just sort of gambling money because it's easy come, easy go. But they're few and far between. Most people fit into either the habitual gambler or the compulsive gambler. Anyway, that's enough for now. I'll go on and tell you more about my time next time. See you then.